anticipated Companies and Allied Matters bill that has passed through so many legislative scrutiny has finally been laid to rest. And with the signing of the bill into an act by President Muhammadu Buhari, it gives impetus to the implementation of the act. This is believed by industry key players to be a major landmark in ensuring transparency, ease of doing business, proper assessment of the formal sector, and a corruption-free business environment in the country. Now, in light of this, we will be looking at some of the anti-corruption drive of this administration and how it has helped to shape a conducive business environment for businesses to thrive across the country. This is Business 24 and NTA News 24 reaching you from Abuja, the nation's capital. And I'm Comfort Amodu. We will also bring you our special segments, including capital market review and export tips. All that will come after this time out. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's set the ball rolling. The war against all forms of corruption is a continuous one, and government has shown that it is determined to use all its arsenal against the scourge to ensure transparency and accountability across all sectors of the economy. By this, I mean the government is extending a hand of fellowship to all, and that includes the judiciary, private sectors, and of course the civil society to intensify the fight against the scourge. This report captures the individual roles and collective responsibilities as well as actions in the fight against corruption. There is renewed vigor in government's fight against corruption, a scourge that is fast becoming endemic in national development due to the incessant diversion of public funds, misappropriation, bribery, and a range of other acts, despite efforts. Although the government has won several battles against some corrupt elements, more needs to be done to capture others in the net. For a collective action against corruption, they suggested monitoring business entities, building of strong institutions, appropriate coordination, appointment of relevant persons and agencies to holistically fight the acts of corruption in Nigeria.
With the best intention in the world, the government doesn't always have all the resources it needs to be able to monitor, and it doesn't have all the will in the world to be able to sanction errant behavior. Yes, it does have a regulatory function, which means that it needs to set standards of behavior that are acceptable. It has to have the capacity to gather information on compliance, and then it needs to have the capacity for behavior modification when those standards are not being followed. Do they have sufficient leverage? For example, can they gather together to boycott a product to help a business entity realize that it has lost the public confidence? Is there any mass action that they can do that will give them leverage? And thirdly, you need social capital.
Another issue that is very fundamental has to do with disclosure of persons with significant control. This refers to beneficial owners of companies. As you may know, the various anti-corruption initiatives of the government has brought to fore the need to know the ultimate beneficiaries of these companies, because there are instances where companies were incorporated using names of persons that didn't even know how these companies were being run. The benefit actually goes to people that are not even on the record of the entity in the registry. So, because of global concern and in line with our open government partnership commitments, as well as the Extractive Industry Transparency International commitments, and the pronouncement made by Mr. President at the London Anti-Corruption Summit in 2016, that Nigeria will establish a register of beneficial ownership. This has now been given effect by these provisions that provides for mandatory disclosure of persons with significant control. We decided to adopt the UK model, of persons with significant control as against the narrow definition of beneficial owners. So the person with significant control will deal with anybody that has share capital threshold or voting right threshold of up to 5%, or somebody that controls the appointment of majority of the directors, or somebody on whose direction the directors are accustomed to act. So, which means even a shadow director will fall within the definition of a person with significant control. And disclosure has to be made by the company. Immediately that person qualifies as such, and whenever the company is filing annual return, all informal businesses register, because if you do not register, it's difficult to verify your information. And you may have two individuals with identical names. You wouldn't know who you are dealing with. But if your information is available in a register that can be verified, at least anybody that wants to deal with you will be more comfortable, because he knows that it's not just you. You may be an imposter if your details are not there. But if you are recorded in the register, you can easily verify to know that, look, this is Mr. A, who is in the business of poultry, whose address is at so place, and your identity will be there. CSC wouldn't just register you without knowing your identity.
All this informed an online interactive session on collective responsibility and actions in the fight against corruption, organized by the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption, PACAC. They advocated stiffer prosecution of offenders to ensure total compliance with standard procedures, as well as creation of a level playground for key players across the judiciary, private sector, and the citizens.
For example, there should be some emphasis regarding the use of non-conviction-based asset forfeiture regimes in Nigeria. Our anti-corruption agencies should use it very well so that looters in Nigeria will know that corruption will not pay. Related to that, we need to ensure that the Process of Crime Act becomes a reality, so that we have an agency that will manage recovered loots. Then again, we need a lot of effort to make sure that whistleblowing pays in Nigeria. We should work towards making sure that lawyers are reporting entities. In other words, if they know the client that has come to them has committed a crime, including corruption, then they should be able, or they should be compelled, to tell the authorities. Then PACAC has been spearheading the issue of mainstreaming our problems of corruption in the United Nations Assembly. So we should encourage all African countries under the African Union and collaboration of South-South in nature to ensure that the issue of corruption becomes a permanent agenda in the United Nations system.
How do we get people to understand that everything they complain about in Nigeria, we don't have water, we don't have good education, we don't have electricity, are substantially the consequences of corruption? If we can do that, if we succeed in doing this, I think it will be easier for collective action to be, mobilized against corruption. In instances like these, COVID-19 should teach us a lesson. Suddenly, even if you have $1 billion, you couldn't travel. So if you have stolen $1 billion from government, you couldn't travel. But if that billion had been invested in our healthcare system, we have been beneficiary.
Within the agencies, there are mistructs even amongst themselves. So there is lack of coordination. For the agencies, ICPC, EFCs to be able to work together, they need to coordinate appropriately. Majority of the people have been left behind. And these are the bulk of the people who can fight corruption. It is obvious that institutions are not fighting, and we need to carry the work of corruption to the mass of the Nigerian people.
For the government, it says the fight against corruption is total and nothing will be left to chance. Certainly, the fight against corruption is a collective one. Now, you recall how the Voluntary Asset and Income Declaration Scheme, VAID, helped mop up funds for the federal government. This is one of other efforts aimed at ridding the system of all corruption tendencies. Now, we take you to the streets to see people's reaction to these renewed efforts.
you can see that the awareness is more created now, especially in public offices. That is not as easy as usual to carry government's money like that. Secondly, you can now see that the fight has even been taken to the public, that it is now that people can ask somebody that they are working together, why have you done this, where has this one been used? So in the area of public discipline, in the area of public awareness against corruption, in the area of encouraging the corrupt institutions to wake up to the challenge, he has succeeded.
The fight of corruption by Mr. President started well, because when he came into office in his first tenure, when he was talking about fighting the corruption, people were happy, people were overwhelmed that corruption is gone. Even corrupt people are returning their stolen money.
We also have our own role to play. As in, we'll not sleep and be complaining that there's no work, there's no this, there's no that.
Because corruption itself is at the highest peak, to me, for now.
How to improve on the fight of corruption is to take away the greedy people in the cabinet.
Indeed, Nigerians are signing up for the anti-corruption fight. And moving forward, the federal government has reiterated its readiness to ensure smooth takeoff of the federal government's special economic zones located in Cross River and Kano states. Chiwabi Walter Nnaji reports that this was made known at an event to engage the transaction advisors for the reform in Abuja.
Considering the over 100 billion naira sunk into the development and completion of the Kano and Cross River State Special Economic Zones and Export Processing Zones by the federal government last year, efforts are still being made to ensure project takes off as soon as possible to ensure increased investment opportunities in the country, job creation, economic stability, and encourage ease of doing business. The signing of an agreement to engage the transaction advisors for the concessioning of the project is to kickstart arrangements for the takeoff of the zones.
We have gotten to the point where things will finally be consummated.
What we are looking at basically is to have a three-tier structure for the concessioning of the two free trade zones. One is the selection of a property ownership company that will have the legal ownership of the two free trade zones. We will then appoint a concessionaire through a competitive bidding selection process.
The zones, when fully operational, is believed to act as a catalyst for the development of Nigeria's manufacturing sector and growth of the rail sectors.
And now, the 100 billion naira earmarked for the development of the special economic zones really is paying off. It's our time to look at the capital market, where negative growth has continued to characterize trading on the floor of the exchange. Let's now join our capital market reviewer, Uche Uwaleke, for an update on the capital market figures.
It was a mixed grill this week. The market just ended on a negative note. The all-share index dropped by 0.15% just today, Friday. But you also notice that throughout the week, it's been a fight between the bulls and the bears. The market opened the week on a negative note. And for 2 straight days, we had a drop in the all-share index and market cap. That is Mondays and Tuesday. But on Wednesday, the market gained. And we also had the momentum sustained on Thursday. So we had 2 days of gain and then 3 days of loss this week, namely Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So one could say it was a mixed grill. But what is important is that the market still ended on a positive note week on week, because the strong gain we had on Wednesday of 1.04% ensured that it wasn't entirely, a negative story. So the market finished week on week positive at 0.60%. Of course, the factors that have been playing out. The previous week, the market was quite bullish, ending by over 1%. So what happened this week was more of a profit taking. Also, my advice to investors, this period, is to remain focused and not to be speculative, more or less, because if you're speculating, you're no more an investor. So the investor should have more of a longer term outlook. You don't, for retail investors in particular, I don't expect them to think that they could go in today and then tomorrow reap benefits. But again, it's important to point out that the returns from investing in the stock market, the returns don't just come from the capital appreciation. Okay, there are also dividends, and that's why I advise investors to look out for companies with good fundamentals, stocks with good fundamentals that that have this track record of paying dividends. So, and that's why you find companies like, in the banking sector, for example, Zenith, GT, doing well because of this track record they have of paying dividends. So if you invest in such companies, apart from the capital appreciation, you may have, there are also dividends, and these companies could also pay, a bonus. So for investors in the Nigerian capital market, this is the time to, and I keep saying it, display emotional discipline and not to panic. Even in the global scene, things are beginning to look up. Look up what economies are restarting. Lockdowns have been lifted, is reflecting in oil price. Okay, oil price has remained above $40 per barrel, and that, in my view, will impact positively on our capital market. What the challenge we are having now in the economy generally, has to do with the issue of forex liquidity. Forex liquidity is affecting many things, including the capital market. So, but I'm sure with the central bank's plan to gradually unify the exchange rates, we expect that will lead to an inflow of capital into the country and boost liquidity in the forex market. So, investors shouldn't. This is not the time to invest in to speculate in currency. This is not the time to invest in Ponzi schemes. This is not the time to take all manner of uncalculated risks.
And next is the export tips, where Annabelle Kamuche will guide us through on what is expected of an exporter in such a time that we're in. I'm talking about the coronavirus pandemic.
There are still goods in Nigeria that still have competitive advantage in the international market, even in the face of the pandemic. Some of these goods are like, these commodities, agricultural commodities, are like the ginger, the Nigerian ginger that has a lot of potency. We realize that a lot of people have high demand for organic certified ginger because for some people they use it as a preventive measure for COVID-19. There is also hibiscus, there is turmeric. We also have people who are making demands for soya beans, for sesame, and even for cashew. For people who want to go into export of agricultural commodities into the international market, they need to understand first what the territories that they want to export their products to in terms of having market intelligence. They have to understand Incoterms, which are the different terms used for export, because for every contract that you get, there are Incoterms that you need to understand, and then you also need to understand the maximum residue level of the country that you want to export your product to, so that you don't invest money and then the product gets rejected. And you also need to understand the standards that the product that you want to export requires to get into that market.
Thank you for this great and vital tips. I'm sure business operators would take advantage of them. Many thanks, Annabelle, as always. And thank you, our viewers, for always being part of the program. This is where we draw the curtain for this week's episode of Business24. Ensure to join the conversation on our social media handles and send us your feedback. Till next week, I'm Comfort and Modu, signing out on behalf of the production crew. Stay blessed.